Can you talk a little bit, each of you, about how the current economic issues that we're facing has impacted the clean tech industry? There was, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, everything you heard was green, 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 green. And then all of a sudden you don't seem to hear as much about green because of what's going on in the economy. And Tom, I'll start with you.
Sure. One of the best comments I heard kind of put it all in perspective was Donald Trump had mentioned, he says, the government gave all these billions of dollars to the bank, but basically when you walk into a bank and you ask for money and you give them a good plan, they laugh at you. And I think that's the reality of the situation right now. I think, to one side to defend the banks, they kind of lent money out to unqualified, customers before, and so now they're afraid to loan the money out at all. But in the reality of things is the other part is you have to have the reverse customer financing. What I mean by that, in my perspective and how we run our company, and we're already cash flow positive, we haven't even sold a product yet, is that fact that you have to work with your customers and have them help you finance. If your innovation is, good enough, and they're going to be behind you, and they're going to help you with the finance. And that's kind of where I think the new world is right now, is you have to go out and find a customer and have that customer believe in you enough to finance it.
How about you, David?
Well, in China, I think what it has done is actually sharpened the public relations and also the potentially oncoming market towards clean tech and green tech. In other words, in November, China released a 4 trillion yuan stimulus package. Much of that is earmarked for a lot of the infrastructure that we've been talking about this morning. A few weeks ago, on March 23rd, the Chinese government. Thank you. A few weeks ago, the Chinese government also released a subsidy through the Ministry of Construction, also backed by the Ministry of Finance and Commerce, for solar PVs. So all these things are coming on, but what will enable it is the smart grid. And so that's another place where China has to enable itself to be able to accept and buy back the electricity, distribute it, and also make it commercially viable.
Okay. And Marianne, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I agree that I think that it's still part of the conversation. I just feel that it is much sharper. So if we look back 18 months ago, there was just kind of tremendous headiness and sort of giddiness around clean tech. And there was, in the startup community, there was, sort of money was cheap, capital was cheap, and there was sort of this we can do anything kind of mentality. And the conversation has shifted much more to what can I do and where does it provide value and who's going to pay for it. And so I think that's really sharpened things around what's the business that you're bringing to market. At a national level, I think there's still a lot of attention on clean issues. I do think that has, in the face of the financial crisis, that's been augmented by a discussion on jobs. And so that a lot of the clean tech focus now has shifted to jobs and how that grows the economy and how that positions us on the backside of this. So there's kind of a shifting to economics and a shifting to jobs in the discussion.
And you, Suvi?
A lot of my talk was actually about that at a micro level. I think at a macro level, there's always a positive and a negative, and I think the negative first is that it's taken a lot of the momentum off of it. So, for example, the fact that, as I mentioned, solar is not growing as quickly this year is at a macro level and from a climate change aspect a real problem. I think the positive is that a lot of governments, for example, Obama administration is stepping up to a large extent, and so that's to counter effect what's going on in the broader environment. So that's a plus, and I think that will have reverberating effects and will have long-term effects. That's a positive. But I think we have to be cognizant that while I think a lot of the bubble that existed has burst, and to some extent that's a good thing. At a macro level, from a climate change perspective, I think it's a real problem.
How about you, Woody?
This is a talk for a whole nother session. There's so much to be said here. But let me just summarize a couple of things. I'm sorry, there's a lot to say about it, but I'll be quick. And actually, David, thank you for the microphone, because I was going to refer to you. One of the things we need to do is admit something, and that is this country and this state and this region do not have energy plans. Energy plans impact directly the demand for solar, renewable energy, clean, green tech, okay? China does. They're called 5-year plans. They're stated, they're in place, there's money behind them. Those resources allow companies, like many of you are here in the audience, to plan and know that there's going to be resources coming along the line. That's what we need. We don't have it. I don't even hear it really being talked about in Washington, okay? Certainly not in Sacramento. When someone says AB 32, that's not an energy plan. That's a cap and trade program, the way it's being defined. And I would have questions about it. Second point, for those of you wanting to get customers in business, take a look at, in the state, resources that from groups like mine in Los Angeles that have bond funds to green buildings. That's an immediate, duh. Respond to the RFPs, duh. There's resources there. Secondly, go to Sacramento and check the California Energy Commission, the PEER program, the Public Interest Energy Research. They have monies coming from the Obama administration through the stimulus package through the state that then could be applied for by anybody in this room or any combination or partnership thereof. There's lots more, but that's just to get started.
I think you can keep the microphone. I think mine is working here. This next question is for you, Woody, and you brought up this issue of cap and trade. You have said that you are skeptical of the cap and trade system. Can you talk a little bit why?
This is another hour
This is
discussion.
another session,
Yeah.
okay.
I used to be in state government. I was Governor Davis's renewable energy advisor and worked on emerging technologies and finance and helped start some of this. The reason I'm skeptical are two things. One is the ethics of it. That is to say, if I have a REC, if you will, renewable energy credit, and I trade it to you or to you, I'm letting you get off the hook for being responsible for reducing pollution, okay? The second is, I was in government when we had what was called deregulation. Anybody in the room remember that? Remember the smoke and mirrors from San Francisco, called fog? That was called, in an earlier form of cap and trade. You traded something, there wasn't really anything there. At the end of the day, Enron and others were gaming, if you will, the energy sector throughout the country actually. And I'm afraid that's what may happen. There are examples of it working or being put into place in Europe. They're not actually working very well. There are some people, including a group in Chicago, that have an exchange that's up in operation. There's one starting in San Diego, and you'll see more and more of it. I would urge all of you, keep the money under your pillow, at least for the time being.
Okay. Thank you. This next question is for you, Marianne. Are there any sustainable sectors that you think have passed their prime as an investment? And are there some that are still a little bit too early to put some money into?
It's a great question. Past their prime, indicates that they've spoiled or something like that. And I don't think that that's true.
You can buy the microprocessor and then they're all spoiled and you can...
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think that there are definitely sectors of clean tech investing that are more mature. And so, for example, the one locally that comes to mind a lot is solar. And people will say, oh, God, venture capitalists have invested in forgive me, I don't even know the number, but it's in excess of 100 startup companies in solar.